The Honourable Peter Collier is seeking the call. Before I give the Honourable Peter Collier the call, I remind the House that it is the Honourable Member's first speech and therefore there should be no interjections. The Honourable Peter Collier.
Thank you, Mr President. Firstly, may I congratulate you, Mr President, on your election to the position of President of this House. I also congratulate the Honourable George Cash on his re-election to the position as Chairman of Committees. I'd also like to thank most sincerely the Clerk of the House and all of the parliamentary staff for their assistance and guidance that they provided for me as a new member. I'm confident that all incoming new members to this House would agree that the induction sessions that were conducted by the parliamentary staff were of considerable assistance and value. I was honoured to be elected to represent the citizens of the North Metropolitan region in this chamber in the 2005 West Australian election. Having been born a political being, having been an active participant in the Liberal Party since I was 16 years of age, and having taught political theory at the secondary level of education for over 20 years, the notion of participating in the political process as opposed to commentating upon it always appeared inevitable to me. Before I make comment on several issues, I deem it appropriate to provide some background on my personal life. I was born and bred in Kalgoorlie in 1959. In retrospect, I can say that I had a charmed childhood. My parents owned a small grocery and liquor store, and while we were certainly not what you would term affluent, I never went without. Life was basically comfortable and uncomplicated. As you do as a child, I relied upon my parents for everything, materially as well as for guidance in life skills and loving support. I was always given an abundance of all three. Neither my two sisters nor I were ever found wanting. In essence, life consisted of school, North Kalgoorlie Primary School and Eastern Goldfields Senior High School, an abundance of valued friends, tennis, my golden palomino, and working in our corner store. Almost without warning, those days of innocence came to an end. I left Kalgoorlie at the age of 17 to continue my education. While my parents and elder sister also moved to Perth, the younger of my sisters remains in Kel with her family to this day. The town holds a special place for me, and I'm delighted that it is currently receiving excellent representation at both levels of government through Matt Burney and Barry Hass. After Kalgoorlie, I spent 4 years at the University of Western Australia, where I gained a Bachelor of Arts degree with a double major in political science and history and a diploma in education. Following university, I entered the teaching profession, where I remained until my election to this chamber. Initially, I taught in the government sector, John Curtin Senior High School and Les Moody Senior High School, before moving to the private sector, Presbyterian Ladies College for 3 years, and for the past 15 years at Scotch College. Over this period, I've held a number of senior positions, including Head of Politics and History at both Presbyterian Ladies College and Scotch College during my tenure at those institutions, as well as Head of Ross House, which is primarily a pastoral position at Scotch College for the last 10 years. These positions of responsibility have provided me with considerable insight into the challenges and expectations of the contemporary secondary student and the role of the classroom teacher and the school administrator. I always found teaching to be a vehemently positive and rewarding experience, and I thoroughly enjoyed each of the 4 schools at which I taught, leaving each of the first 3 through opportunity, certainly not through disillusionment. I always gained particular satisfaction teaching politics, where a number of my former students achieved at the highest level in the TEE. I found debating contemporary issues with highly idealistic adolescents on a daily basis extremely invigorating. In a profession in which it's so easy to wish one's life away, as you count down the periods to the end of each day, the weeks to the end of each term, and the terms to the end of each year, I can state without reservation that I still held the same passion for my role as an educator on my last day of teaching as I did on day 1 at John Curtin Senior High School in 1981. Combined with teaching, tennis coaching has been a significant element of my life. To this end, having a strong and valued bond with the world's greatest ever woman tennis player, Margaret Court, has provided me with endless opportunities, including coaching numerous state and national champions and spending time on the International Women's Tennis Tour. That in itself was a tremendous period of my life. I thrived on the daily challenges provided by the tennis circuit, the endless desire to be the best one can be, and the constant accountability through performance and results, which is not unlike politics. Having said this, the single most significant element to emerge from my association with tennis has been my relationship with Margaret Court, my mentor in life. I recently travelled to Sri Lanka with Margaret to conduct a series of tennis clinics for victims of the tsunami and the underprivileged. It was a deeply moving and spiritual experience which has been life-changing for me. I acknowledge Margaret Court for all that she represents, and I thank her for all that she is to me. In the past, I've also held positions on a number of state and federal advisory committees, including the National Expert Advisory Committee on School Drug Education, the West Australian Youth Advisory Committee, the West Australian Youth Suicide and Self-Harm Prevention Committee, and the West Australian School Drug Education Project. Also, I am currently the patron of the Trenton Park Dogs Refuge. Finally, I've been Senior Vice Chairman of the West Australian section of Australians for a Constitutional Monarchy for a number of years. I have benefited considerably from my involvement with these committees and associations, and I'm grateful for the opportunities that they have presented for me. My decision to pursue a position in this chamber has been long felt. As mentioned earlier, I was born a political being, and I've had a long-held desire to be a representative of the people in this place on behalf of the Liberal Party. I'll always be conscious of the fundamental role of this Parliament and the role that I'll be expected to play within it. Based upon the Westminster model, the essential role of our Parliament is to represent the people and to debate on behalf of the people. Without question, ultimate authority rests with the people, and this Parliament exists under the sovereignty of the people. I commit myself to representing the people through the promotion of the philosophy of the Liberal Party. I'm extremely conscious of the fact that there are billions of people on this earth who want to vote but can't, and that there are hundreds of millions who can vote but don't. However, in Australia, West Australia specifically, with compulsory voting, a vast majority of our citizens utilise their democratic right to a ballot. I will be their representative and I will represent their interests. I will not use this place as a vehicle for personal retribution or vendettas. Unfortunately, in more recent years, parliaments across Australia are being increasingly and at times tragically used as such forums through the abuse of an age-old procedure known as parliamentary privilege. The principle of parliamentary privilege essentially commenced through the British Bill of Rights in 1689. Article 9 of that bill stated that the freedom of speech and debates or proceedings in Parliament ought not to be impeached or questioned in any court or place out of Parliament. This was designed to protect the Parliament from the King. In 1891, these privileges were set out in the Acts of the West Australian Parliament, the Parliamentary Privileges Act and the Parliamentary Papers Act. In contemporary society, there is little merit in protecting Parliament from the monarch, as our Commonwealth and state constitution provide meticulous checks and balances, resulting in an extremely effective parliamentary system. There is certainly justification in maintaining that aspect of privilege which deals with contempt of the Parliament to ensure that there is no interference with the proper functioning of the Parliament. However, the most controversial aspect of parliamentary privilege is that relating to parliamentary freedom of speech, a vehicle designed to protect members of Parliament from defamation action or to be used as evidence in any court. Similarly, qualified privilege also exists, a category which provides some legal protection to the media. Again, there is considerable merit in the principal concept of this aspect of parliamentary privilege. However, I have very deep reservations about the abuse of this particular aspect of parliamentary procedure. And as previously mentioned, I resolve not to use this place to vet personal retribution. I come to this place as a representative of the people of the North Metropolitan Region, and I fully commit myself to their purpose alone. To another area, I guess you can take the boy out of Kalgoorlie, but you can't take Kalgoorlie out of the boy. I'm proud of my country heritage, and I'm extremely grateful for the opportunities that a Kalgoorlie upbringing provided for me. While I've been a permanent resident of Perth for almost 30 years, I remain mindful of the extraordinary challenges that are faced by rural Western Australians each and every day. Tens of thousands from the bush have to regularly travel exceptional distances to reach the most basic services. In addition, health, education and communication facilities, just to name a few, that are available to residents of the bush are frequently substandard. It is in this vein that I express my disappointment at the recent changes to the Electoral Act. With its sheer geographical size, Western Australia is unique, and those making a conscious choice to live outside the metropolitan region deserve special recognition and consideration. To counter the government's initial attempts to repeal the Electoral Districts Act, former Liberal Party President Kim Keogh established the Defence of Democracy Committee in 2002. The role of this committee, of which I was chairman, was to raise funds to fight the government's initial move to amend the Electoral Districts Act. An extremely productive committee, we received overwhelming support from members of the Liberal Party and beyond, and raised hundreds of thousands of dollars to successfully defend the franchise of rural Western Australians in the West Australian Supreme Court and ultimately in the High Court of Australia. As previously mentioned, I am disappointed at the recent changes to the Electoral Act, and I will always remain a determined advocate for rural Western Australians. As a teacher of over 20 years' experience, I'm fully conscious of the considerable challenges and expectations facing this profession in contemporary society. Significant shifts in the fabric of the modern family, globalisation and its associated challenges, and the ongoing changes to the curriculum have established considerable pressure on today's teachers. As the modern adolescent often regards privileges as rights and their parents demand rather than consult, teachers are increasingly expected to perform a far broader role than they could ever have expected. The role as pastoral carer and its associated demands has evolved to be a commonplace requirement for today's teachers. In addition, with the advent of outcomes-based education and the pending implementation of the associated courses of study at the post-compulsory level, the professional pressures placed upon teachers are considerable. I'm not convinced that the West Australian education system is adequately prepared for these changes, nor that these changes have sufficient essential support from the teaching profession, from the broad parent body, or even the students themselves. There is definitely an air of frustration and cynicism that currently permeates through the teaching community, and equally a significant amount of confusion amongst parents and students. There already exists sufficient disquiet with regard to outcomes-based education, where it has been implemented in the K to 10 years, to warrant concern. These problems will be compounded with the extension of OBE through the courses of study to years 11 and 12 in the immediate future. I'm not convinced the Curriculum Council has given sufficient consideration to the enormity of the changes associated with the implementation of the courses of study upon our education system and the associated demands placed upon the teaching fraternity and school communities at large. To this end, the Curriculum Council must ensure that comprehensive professional development is provided and funded in all sectors of West Australian education. Given that these are state-driven changes, it is a commitment that the state government needs to provide to all sectors. Long implementation periods are an essential prerequisite for a smooth and effective transition to the courses of study for all involved. This is currently not the case. There is confusion amongst the teaching profession, particularly in regard to the framing of assessments and timelines to be adhered to. This confusion is inevitably being transferred to students and parents. The recent announcement by the Curriculum Council that it intends to delay the implementation of 10 courses of study is testimony to the problems that exist in this area. The notion of full implementation of all courses on one date after comprehensive implementation periods appears to have real merit. In an ageing and conservative profession, unless consideration and accommodation is provided for the very real concerns of the teaching profession over the next few years, I fear that a significant number of teachers will seek alternative employment. Teaching is without a doubt one of the most rewarding occupations imaginable. I'd like to see this profession given the respect and consideration that it so richly deserves, particularly over the next few challenging years. I'd now like to make comment upon recent legislative changes to West Australia's drug laws and the impact of these changes upon our youth. I'm strongly opposed to more liberal laws in relation to illicit drug use, particularly cannabis. To my knowledge, there has been no evidence presented which suggests that cannabis use is beneficial to one's health. On the contrary, there is overwhelming evidence to prove that prolonged cannabis use can be deleterious to one's health, particularly to the male and female reproductive systems, to the immune system, to the heart and lungs. There is also evidence that cannabis use is addictive, that it impairs learning, and that it frequently leads to the usage of higher order illicit drugs. In fact, as quoted by AMA-WA President Paul Skerritt in the West Australian, just as recently as the 2nd of March 2005, the drug is provoking manic depression, schizophrenia, depression and panic attacks amongst the users, some of whom had used it for the first time. Also included in the same article was a quote by Melbourne University's Professor Castle, who said, "Drug use, as in cannabis, during the formative years of life, such as the years at school, could affect the way a teenager or young adult thought, impairing cognitive ability and having a strong impact upon job prospects. The negative impacts of cannabis use upon one's health are without question. Also without question is the fact that a significant proportion of our adolescents, accurately in the range of about 1/4 of 17-year-olds, indulge regularly or semi-regularly in cannabis use. There is no indication that this level will decline. In fact, there is every reason to expect this figure to continue to increase. Dependency levels will inevitably correspondingly rise, as will the proportion of users who progress to higher order illicit drug usage. This is a cause for further concern. I'm firmly of the belief that more liberal laws in relation to cannabis use over recent years will inevitably lead to an increased prevalence of cannabis use amongst West Australian youth. The message that is being portrayed through recent changes relating to cannabis use to the community at large, and in particular to our youth, is that cannabis use is acceptable. The message is transparent and it is unambiguous. Whereas a generation ago the use of cannabis was deemed a hanging offence, recent legislative changes have altered the goalposts. As a result, cannabis is no longer held in with the same disdain. Our youth hold these changes almost as a badge of honour, that the use of cannabis use is acceptable. Parents, teachers, counsellors and the like are faced with the unenviable task of explaining the negative attributes of cannabis use against what our youth see as a legitimisation of the product through legislation. More liberal laws in relation to cannabis use are regressive and have the potential to inflict significant damage upon our youth and the community as a whole. I'd like to take this opportunity to acknowledge and thank a number of people for their valued support over many years. To begin, I'd like to thank my wonderful parents, Les and Beryl Collier, who I'm delighted to see here today, for being the consummate parents. I would also like to acknowledge and thank my sisters, Diane Edwards and Kerry Holman, and their families for so brilliantly completing the family circle. In addition, I pay tribute to my political mentor and friend, Sir Charles Court, and I thank him for his wise counsel over many years. I also acknowledge my many friends and supporters in the Liberal Party and beyond for their valued support and encouragement, particularly Sally and Angus Plummer, Robin Nolan, Michael and Robin Mission, Kate Watts, Lorraine Beckett, Richard Wilson, Julie Johnson, Jeremy Sher, Phil Patterson, Deb Brady, John O'Daventry, Barbara and Greg Brophy, Daniel and Nick Blaine, Daphne Bogue, Clive and Carolyn Hartz, the Kildare family, the Court families and the Scotch College community. There are numerous others, Liberal Party friends, both parliamentary and non-parliamentary, lifelong friends from so many walks of life and professional colleagues from teaching and tennis coaching, to whom I am eternally grateful and I recognise and thank. I would also like to pay tribute to the Curtin Division and the Nedlands branch of the Liberal Party. Both Curtin Division, which is currently superbly represented by my valued friend, the Honourable Julie Bishop, and Nedlands branch are thriving examples of the Liberal Party in practice. They both have large numbers of enthusiastic members, they meet regularly in order to service the needs and desires of their membership base, and they both hold regular social functions to further develop camaraderie. In essence, they are the epitome of what a political organisation should be: avenues for debate, relevance and participation. Having held senior office bearer positions in the Curtin Division and Nedlands branch over many years, I can attest to their success, and I thank the membership of both for their overwhelming support and friendship. Ultimately, the lay organisation of a political party is its foundation. It is its heart and its soul, and in this context, the Liberal Party is in extremely safe hands. To conclude, I always affirm to my students that they should treat life as a series of opportunities, not a series of events. It's a philosophy upon which I have tried to direct my own destiny. I regard my election to this place as a real opportunity. It's an opportunity to represent the people of the North Metropolitan region. It's an opportunity to represent the Liberal Party, its philosophy, members and supporters in this chamber. It is an opportunity to explore options, to consider legislation which is reflective of our community's expectations, and to debate alternatives. I come to this place conscious of the expectations, not only of my supporters and the supporters of the Liberal Party, but of the entire community. I come to this place as someone with considerable life skills, and I feel a broad awareness and sympathy of the needs and expectations of our contemporary society. I'm conscious of the extraordinary privilege associated with being elected by the people of the North Metropolitan Region to represent them in this place. I commit myself to their cause. Thank you, Mr. President.